In the vast spiral arm of the Okari expanse, the Galactic Interspecies Tournament of Excellence was not merely a competition, but the pinnacle of civilized accomplishment. For 14 millennia, species from across the known universe had gathered to compete in tests of intellect, strength, and creativity, all meticulously designed to identify the most advanced species in the cosmos. And for 14 millennia, one specific rule had remained unchanged. No humans allowed. It wasn't personal, at least that's what the Governance Council claimed. Humans were simply too volatile, too unpredictable, too messy. The tournament demanded precision, protocol, and above all, predictability. When the Zalthurians competed in the mathematical symphony, one could reliably expect their 7 tentacled appendages to manipulate the quantum abacus with exactly 4.2 million calculations per second. No more, no less. When the crystalline Vox engaged in the diplomatic labyrinth, their responses followed perfect game theory optimizations calculated to 16 decimal places. Humans with their hormones and hunches, their jokes and their jealousies, they were deemed a liability. To the tournament's immaculate order, the ban had stood unchallenged, a footnote in the official competition guidelines that no one questioned, until this year. I must protest this travesty. Supreme Councilor Zixal's voice modulator vibrated with such intensity that small puffs of noxious gas escaped from his breathing apparatus. As the representative of the Baljuri Federation, a species of methane-breathing cephalopods, he had spent the last 3 centuries climbing the ranks of tournament bureaucracy. Now, as he floated in his hovering containment sphere at the center of the council chamber, his normally blue-green tentacles had flushed a dangerous purple. The human does not belong here, he continued, gesturing with 3 appendages toward the lone figure standing casually at the entrance to the chamber. Our bylaws are clear. The human in question, one Charlie Mendez of Earth, looked remarkably unbothered by the commotion. In fact, he appeared to be chewing something, which only intensified Zixal's agitation. Charlie was of average height, for his species with dark hair that refused to stay neatly in place despite what appeared to have been a genuine attempt to tame it. He wore the standard-issue tournament competitor uniform, though somehow on him it looked rumpled, as if the self-adjusting fabric was struggling to maintain its preset configuration. The bylaws were amended, replied Talak, the insectoid representative of the Hive Collective. Her mandibles clicked in a rhythm that signaled mild amusement. By unanimous vote of the Observation Committee, the human's application was unprecedented. Unprecedented? Sputtered Zixal. It's unprecedented because it's forbidden. We've never had a human compete because we explicitly ban humans from competing. Charlie finally stopped chewing and raised his hand like a schoolchild seeking permission to speak. This gesture alone caused several council members to twitch in discomfort. Spontaneous movement without proper signaling protocols was considered deeply uncivilized in most evolved societies. If I could just, Charlie began. The applicant will refrain from vocalizing until formally addressed by the council chair, intoned Rig Vorbis, the amphibious council chair, whose translucent skin revealed the complex network of neural pathways, currently processing at incredible speeds beneath the surface. Charlie nodded and mimed zipping his lips, another gesture that sent ripples of confusion through the assembly. Rig Vorbis continued. The Observation Committee found a peculiar omission in the human's application. For the first time in tournament history, a human managed to complete the application of intent without a single error, inconsistency, or emotional outburst. This anomaly warranted further investigation. It warranted immediate projection. Zixal's containment sphere bobbed erratically, requiring the automatic stabilizers to engage with an audible hum. And yet, Talak continued, her compound eyes gleaming with what in her species passed for excitement, when we subjected the application to 14 levels of psycholinguistic analysis, we found no evidence of deception, emotional contamination, or irrational thought patterns. By all measurable standards, this human submitted a perfect application. A murmur rippled through the council chamber as various species communicated their shock through their preferred methods. Electromagnetic pulses, pheromone releases, subharmonic vibrations, and in one case, a rapid change in skin luminosity that briefly turned the chamber a startling shade of mauve. And so, Vorbis concluded, as per subsection 7.3 of the tournament qualification protocols, any being who completes a perfect application must be granted a qualification review, regardless of species-specific exclusions. The human has been granted provisional competitor status pending final approval by this council. Charlie, still silently standing at attention, offered a thumbs up. Several council members flinched. "This is outrageous." Zixal's voice modulator reached such a high pitch that the crystalline representative's outer shell developed hairline fractures. "The human will disrupt the tournament, cause diplomatic incidents, and worst of all, introduce unpredictability." "I believe," said a new voice, quiet yet somehow commanding immediate attention, "that is precisely why this experiment must proceed." All eyes, optical sensors, and sensory apparatuses turned toward the source. Zithria, the eldest member of the council and representative of the Void Dwellers, being so ancient they remembered the first tournament. Her form was barely visible, a shimmer in reality rather than a solid presence. "For 14,000 years, Zithria continued, her voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere, we have measured excellence by our ability to perform precisely as expected. Perhaps it is time to consider whether true excellence might sometimes emerge from the unexpected." The chamber fell silent. When Zithria spoke, even Zixal knew better than to object. Vorbis cleared all three of his throat sacs. "The human may now address the council." Charlie stepped forward, no longer chewing, his expression suddenly serious. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly measured. "Members of the council, I understand your concerns. Humans have a reputation. But I'm not here to disrupt your tournament or cause trouble. I'm here because for the first time in our history, Earth has achieved the technological and cultural benchmarks required for consideration. I've trained for 7 years to represent my planet. All I ask is the opportunity to compete fairly by your rules and standards." Talak's antennae twitched in what might have been approval. "And you understand that any deviation from protocol, any emotional outburst or unpredictable behavior, will result in immediate disqualification?" "Perfectly," Charlie replied with a small smile. "I'll be as predictable as a quantum oscillation in a vacuum." Several council members exchanged glances. The human had just made what appeared to be a joke, but one that referenced advanced physics in a technically accurate way. It was disconcerting. After 73 minutes of additional deliberation, including a 17-minute recess when the gaseous collective needed to divide and recombine to process new information, the council reached its decision. "Charles Mendez of Earth," Vorbis announced formally, "you are granted full competitor status in the 14th 322nd Galactic Interspecies Tournament of Excellence. The council's decision is final." Charlie bowed deeply. "Thank you. I won't let you down." As the council members dispersed, Zixal floated close to the human, his tentacles still pulsing in agitated purple. "I will be watching you, human. One mistake, one moment of your species' infamous creativity, and I will personally ensure your disqualification." Charlie smiled pleasantly. "Looking forward to the competition, Councilor." As Zixal drifted away, Charlie's smile faltered just slightly. 7 years of training in emotional suppression, perfect procedural compliance, and absolute predictability had earned him this opportunity. Now he just had to maintain that perfection for the next 30 days of competition. How hard could it be? "Competitor briefing commences in T-3 minutes, announced the tournament AI, its voice echoing through the competitor preparation chamber. "All beings must be at assigned orientation nodes." Charlie stood at his designated spot, a simple circular platform marked with the Earth symbol, a recent addition to the tournament's extensive catalog of participating worlds. Around him, 57 other competitors from across the galaxy waited at their own stations. The chamber was designed to accommodate all known forms of sentient life, with specialized environmental bubbles for methane breathers, gravity adjusters for high-density species, and temperature regulation for everything, from near absolute zero to plasma state beings. Despite this inclusivity of physical form, The atmosphere was anything but welcoming. Most competitors were studiously ignoring Charlie, though a few were openly staring with what he interpreted as disdain, curiosity, or in the case of the gelatinous, Morax, possibly hunger. "Nervous, human?" came a voice from his left. Charlie turned to see a tall, willowy being with skin that resembled polished copper and eyes that rotated independently like chameleons. According to the identifier hovering above her platform, this was Kelveri, representative of the Sensorium Collective. "Not at all," Charlie replied calmly, careful to maintain the emotional flatness he'd practiced. "Though I appreciate your interest in my psychological state." Kelveri's left eye swiveled to examine him more closely, while her right remained fixed on the central podium where the briefing would take place. "You're not what I expected." "How so?" "Human entertainment broadcasts reach even our distant worlds. You appear to be missing the customary bravado, inappropriate mating overtures, and tendency to shoot at problems." Charlie managed not to smile. "Those are dramatizations, exaggerations for entertainment value." Both of Kelveri's eyes now focused on him. "Then perhaps the council was right to admit you. Though I should warn you, the Bantari have placed substantial wagers on your failure." Charlie glanced across the chamber where three crystalline beings stood in perfect triangular formation, their faceted bodies catching and refracting light in complex patterns. "The Bantari? What are they known for?" "Absolute adherence to probability mathematics and a complete inability to comprehend humor," Kelveri replied. "They've calculated a 97.824% chance you will be disqualified before the third event." "And what about you?" Charlie asked. "Have you placed any bets?" For the first time, Kelveri's expression shifted, her metallic features rearranging in what might have been amusement. "I never gamble on uncertainties, human, and despite your carefully controlled demeanor, you are the very definition of an uncertainty." Before Charlie could respond, the central podium illuminated, and a holographic figure materialized, Tournament Director Plex, a fourth-dimensional being who appeared to humans as constantly shifting geometric patterns. "Competitors," Plex's voice resonated not as sound, but as a direct neural impression. "Welcome to the 14th and 22nd Galactic Tournament of Excellence. You represent the pinnacle of your respective species, the most intelligent, adaptable, and disciplined individuals your worlds have produced. Over the next 30 days, you will compete in 27 events designed to test every aspect of advanced civilization." The air around them shimmered as holographic displays appeared, showing complex schematics of the various competition venues. "The tournament consists of 3 categories," Plex continued. "Intellectual challenges, which test reasoning, problem-solving, and knowledge application. Physical trials, which examine your species' adaptation and evolutionary advantages. And, finally, civilization metrics, which evaluate your cultural development, ethical frameworks, and societal harmony." Charlie listened intently, noting that many competitors appeared to be in states of deep concentration or meditation. The hive representative was vibrating at a specific frequency, presumably sharing information with its collective. The quantum state Vox seemed to be in multiple positions simultaneously, processing information across probability branches. "The first event begins tomorrow at first light. The empathic labyrinth. This challenge tests your ability to understand and predict the emotional responses of other species. Prepare accordingly." A ripple of what Charlie interpreted as concern moved through the assembly. Empathy, as a first event? It seemed an unusual choice for a gathering that prized logical precision above all else. Plex's form shimmered. "One final note. As you are all aware, this tournament marks the first inclusion of a human competitor. The Council has determined that this experimental inclusion requires additional monitoring. Therefore, all competitors are encouraged to report any irregularities in the human's behavior immediately to tournament officials." Charlie felt 57 sets of sensory organs turn toward him. He maintained a neutral expression while his stomach twisted into knots. "That is all. May excellence prevail." As Plex's form dissolved, and competitors began to disperse toward their assigned quarters. Charlie felt a presence beside him. It was Zixal, the counselor who had most vehemently opposed his inclusion. "The empathic labyrinth," Zixal said, tentacles curling with what might have been satisfaction. "An interesting first challenge for a human. Your species is known for emotional volatility, not emotional understanding." Charlie bowed slightly. "I look forward to the opportunity to disprove such assumptions, Councilor." "Indeed." Zixal's containment sphere drifted closer. "You've been remarkably contained thus far, almost unnaturally so for a human. One might wonder what effort such restraint requires." "No more effort than any disciplined competitor would exert," Charlie replied evenly. "Perhaps." Zixal's voice modulator dropped to a lower frequency. "But discipline has never been humanity's strength. Sooner or later, human, your true nature will emerge. And when it does, I will be watching." As Zixal floated away, Charlie exhaled slowly. Day 1, and already the pressure was mounting. The empathic labyrinth would be challenging enough without the added scrutiny, but he had prepared for this. 7 years of training, studying every available record of past tournaments, learning to suppress every human impulse toward spontaneity and emotion. He could do this. He had to do this. For Earth, yes, but more importantly, for reasons the Council couldn't possibly understand, reasons he'd worked too hard to protect to risk revealing now. "Competitor Mendez," the tournament AI spoke directly to him. "Please proceed to your quarters for pre-competition rest period." Charlie nodded and moved toward the exit, aware of the calculating gazes following him. Tomorrow would be his first real test, not just of his abilities, but of his carefully constructed facade. The empathic labyrinth awaited. The empathic labyrinth was not, as Charlie had initially imagined, a physical maze. Instead, it was a vast spherical chamber whose interior walls shifted and flowed like liquid mercury, creating an ever-changing environment that somehow responded to the emotional states of those within it. "Competitors will enter the labyrinth individually," explained Assistant Director Mealer, ATMI, six-limbed arachnoid whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's ambient light. "Inside you will encounter simulacra of various sentient species expressing emotional states. Your task is to correctly identify the emotion being expressed and respond appropriately according to that species' cultural norms." Charlie stood, with the other competitors in an antechamber, watching as the first participant, a hulking Drox warrior whose species communicated primarily through scent, entered the sphere. Viewing screens materialized around the waiting area, showing the Drox's progress through the challenge. The Drox moved confidently at first, correctly identifying straightforward emotional displays. Aggression in a Tandaran war chant, contentment in the slow undulations of a Vespoid queen. But when faced with the subtle grief-respect ritual of the Gathaki, the Drox hesitated, then made an inappropriate dominance gesture. The chamber walls flashed red and the Drox was promptly ejected. "Emotional subtlety has never been the Drox's strength," murmured Kelvari, who had positioned herself near Charlie again. "Their limited olfactory vocabulary is a significant disadvantage in this event." Charlie nodded, careful not to show his own growing nervousness. Earth had limited contact with most competing species, which meant he was working from incomplete information on many of their emotional signaling methods. His training had included extensive xenopsychology, but theory and practice were vastly different things. One by one, competitors entered the sphere. Some emerged triumphant, having navigated the emotional labyrinth successfully. Others failed, spectacularly, like the quantum state Vox who attempted to exist in multiple emotional states simultaneously and caused a brief system overload. "Human competitor Charles Mendez," announced the tournament AI. "Prepare for entry." Charlie stepped forward, feeling the weight of every gaze upon him. Zixal had appeared in the observation area, his tentacles writhing with what Charlie was beginning to recognize as anticipation. "Remember, human," Mealer chittered, Any excessive emotional display from you will result in immediate disqualification. The challenge is to identify others' emotions, not exhibit your own. Understood, Charlie replied, his voice carefully modulated. The entrance to the sphere dilated open and Charlie stepped inside. Immediately, the environment changed. The walls shimmered and solidified into what appeared to be an Earth-like setting, a cafe. Sitting at a table was a morax, its gelatinous form quivering slightly. Charlie approached cautiously. The morax's translucent body was tinged with a greenish hue, and tiny bubbles were forming and popping rapidly along its surface. Based on his studies, this indicated anxiety? No, anticipation. You are experiencing anticipation, Charlie stated formally. In morax culture, the appropriate response is a gesture of shared temporal awareness. He carefully drew a circle in the air with his finger, then pointed to the center, the morax signal for the moment approaches. The morax vibrated, its color shifting to a pleased blue. The walls of the chamber rippled approvingly and the scene dissolved. Charlie found himself in a new environment, what appeared to be a Balguri methane pool. A simulated Balguri floated before him, its tentacles contracted tightly against its body, chromatophores flashing in a specific pattern. This was trickier. The tight tentacle configuration could indicate concentration, fear, or ritualistic mourning. The chromatophore pattern was the key, rapid pulses of blue-green-black. You are expressing formal regret, Charlie said, recognizing the pattern from his studies. The appropriate response is acceptance of apology without diminishment of status. He slowly lowered his gaze to the ground, then raised it again with his palms turned upward, a gesture he hoped properly translated across species barriers. The simulated Balguri relaxed its tentacles slightly, and the chamber shifted again. Through 8 more scenarios, Charlie progressed, correctly identifying complex emotional states. The subtle difference between hive collective productive disagreement and hierarchical challenge, the almost imperceptible distinction between a void dweller's contemplative silence and its communal meditation invitation. In the observation area, Zixal's irritation grew with each successful interaction. The human is performing adequately, he grudgingly admitted to Rig Vorbis. More than adequately, corrected Tilak. The human has correctly identified emotional nuances that many established competitors missed. But how? Zixal demanded. Humans are emotional, impulsive creatures. They lack the disciplined, empathic training of evolved species. Perhaps, suggested Zithria, her ethereal form materializing beside them. It is precisely because humans experience emotions so intensely that this one can recognize them so accurately in others. A fascinating paradox. Inside the chamber, Charlie faced his final challenge. The environment shifted into a stark, geometric space of perfect angles and surfaces, clearly representing the homeworld of the Bantari. Before him stood a crystalline being, its facets arranged in a configuration he didn't immediately recognize. This was potentially problematic. The Bantari were notoriously difficult for other species to read, their emotions expressed through subtle variations in refracted light patterns. Charlie had studied them, but their emotional lexicon was vast and precise. The Bantari simulacrum stood motionless, light playing through its crystalline form in a complex pattern. Charlie observed carefully, trying to identify the emotional signature. It wasn't aggression or contentment. It appeared to be expectation? No, something else. In the observation area, the actual Bantari representatives leaned forward, their facets gleaming with interest. He will fail, one stated with mathematical certainty. This emotional configuration has a 99.732% failure rate among non-crystalline species. Charlie continued to study the Bantari simulacrum, aware that time was passing and his hesitation might be interpreted as failure. Then he noticed something. A tiny, almost imperceptible vibration in the light pattern, creating a 7th-dimensional harmonic that altered the entire emotional signature. You are expressing humorous skepticism, Charlie announced, surprised by his own conclusion. The appropriate response is to acknowledge the absurdity while maintaining factual grounding. He carefully tapped his right foot 3 times while simultaneously tracing a perfect equilateral triangle in the air with his left hand. The Bantari gesture for, "I recognize the improbability, yet affirm the possibility." The chamber fell silent. In the observation area, the Bantari representatives vibrated in shock. "Impossible," one stated. The human correctly identified quaternary-level emotional harmonics. The walls of the empathic labyrinth shimmered and then solidified into their neutral state. A tone sounded, indicating the challenge was complete. Competitor Charles Mendez has successfully completed the empathic labyrinth, announced the tournament. AI. Performance analysis. 98.7% accuracy in emotional identification, 94.2% appropriateness in cultural response. Overall ranking, 3rd place. 3rd place, out of 58 competitors. Charlie allowed himself a small, controlled nod of acknowledgement as he exited the chamber. In the observation area, the council members exchanged glances. "Most unexpected," Talak chittered. "Most concerning," countered Zixal. "No human should possess such comprehensive understanding of alien emotional states. It suggests preparation beyond normal parameters. Or," Zithria's voice whispered like distant wind, "it suggests we have misunderstood humans all along." As Charlie rejoined the other competitors, he maintained his careful emotional neutrality, despite the surge of satisfaction he felt. The first test was passed, but it was only the beginning, and the scrutiny would only intensify from here. Calvary approached, both eyes swiveling to examine him with new interest. "Impressive performance, human. The Bantari have adjusted their probability calculations regarding your disqualification down to 92.4 on 15%. "Progress," Charlie replied with a small smile. "Though I suspect Councilor Zixal remains unconvinced. Naturally, the Baljuri find emotional fluency threatening. They believe it can be weaponized." Her copper skin rippled slightly. "Can it, human?" Charlie met her rotating gaze steadily. "Understanding is never a weapon, Calvary, though misunderstanding often is." Both her eyes fixed on him momentarily. "The Bantari weren't the only ones surprised by your performance. Many of us are beginning to wonder what other capabilities humans have been hiding behind their reputation for chaos." As she moved away, Charlie felt a momentary doubt. His success in the empathic labyrinth had altered the competitor's perception of him, and possibly not in a way that served his ultimate purpose. Being underestimated had advantages that being respected did not. The tournament AI's voice echoed through the chamber. "All competitors proceed to nutritional intake period followed by rest cycle. Tomorrow's event, the quantum logic cascade." Charlie nodded to himself. From emotional understanding to pure logic, the tournament was designed to test every facet of sentient capability, and tomorrow would bring an entirely different challenge. As he headed toward the nutritional center, he couldn't help but notice Zixal watching him, the councilor's tentacles writhing with suspicion. The human's unexpected success had clearly disturbed the Baljuri representative. "Good," Charlie thought, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction before carefully suppressing it again. Let them wonder. Let them watch. After all, they had no idea what they were really looking for. The quantum logic cascade proved significantly more challenging for Charlie than the empathic labyrinth had been. While he had extensive training in multidimensional logic, the sheer processing speed of species like the Vox and the Bantari gave them a natural advantage in computational challenges. Still, Charlie managed a respectable 12th place, solving 17 of the 20 quantum paradoxes within the allotted time. It was enough to maintain his overall standing in the top quarter of competitors, though not enough to allay Zixal's suspicions. The human performed within acceptable parameters, Zixal grudgingly reported to the council after the event. "Though I maintain there is something irregular about his participation." "Your objection is noted, Councilor," Rig Vorbis replied, his translucent skin revealing neural pathways lighting up with mild irritation. However, after 5 days and 3 events, competitor Mendez has demonstrated full compliance with all tournament protocols. And indeed he had. Through the chromatomorphic symphony, a test of aesthetic perception and creation where Charlie placed 7th, and the gravitational negotiation, a physical challenge requiring adaptation to rapidly changing gravitational conditions, where he struggled to a 15th place finish, Charlie had maintained his carefully controlled demeanor. No outbursts, no spontaneity, no typical human unpredictability. But the strain was beginning to show. On the morning of the 6th day, as competitors gathered for the philosophical axiom debate, Charlie found himself in the preparation chamber fighting a persistent twitch in his left eye. 7 years of training in emotional suppression had prepared him well, but continuous performance under such scrutiny was taking its toll. "You appear to be experiencing minor neural distress," observed Kelvari, who had developed a habit of positioning herself near Charlie before events. "Just focusing on today's challenge," Charlie replied, forcing the twitch to subside through sheer willpower. "Philosophical debate isn't exactly Earth's strongest discipline." "No?" Kelvari's left eye swiveled toward him while her right remained, fixed on a data screen displaying the debate parameters. "I would have thought your species' chaotic thinking would lend itself to philosophical innovation." "Innovation, perhaps. Disciplined axiom construction less so." Both her eyes fixed on him momentarily. "The Sensorium Collective has been monitoring your performance with great interest, human. You've maintained remarkable consistency. Almost unnaturally so." Charlie felt a flutter of concern but kept his expression neutral. "I take the tournament seriously." "Clearly." She leaned slightly closer, her copper skin catching the light. "But one wonders how long you can maintain such perfect control. Humans aren't designed for prolonged emotional suppression, are they? Your literature is full of cautionary tales about the consequences." Before Charlie could respond, the tournament AI announced the commencement of the debate. Competitors were divided into discussion pods of 6, each assigned a fundamental philosophical paradox to resolve using their species' epistemological frameworks. Charlie found himself grouped with Kelvari, a Bantari, a member of the gaseous collective, a methane-breathing Zobulon, and a silicon-based intelligence called a lithoid. Their assigned paradox was the ancient Ship of Theseus problem. If every component of an object is gradually replaced, at what point does it cease to be the original object? The debate began with each competitor presenting their species' approach to the paradox. The Bantari offered a mathematical solution involving probability waves and quantum identity. The gaseous collective, which regularly divided and recombined its consciousness, dismissed the entire concept of fixed identity as primitive. The Zobulon and lithoid presented variations on continuity theory. When Charlie's turn came, he felt 5 very different sensory systems focus on him with intense curiosity. Earth philosophers, he began carefully, have debated this paradox for thousands of years without reaching consensus. Some argue that physical continuity determines identity, others that functional continuity is what matters, and still others that the very concept of fixed identity is flawed. "A non-answer," the Bantari's translated voice chimed dismissively. "Typical of pre-logical species." Charlie felt a flash of irritation, but suppressed it. "Actually, I would argue that the multiplicity of answers is itself significant. The paradox exposes the limitations of binary thinking and highlights the subjective nature of identity categorization. The lithoid's crystalline form vibrated with what might have been interest. Elaborate. The question presupposes that identity must be either preserved or lost, that the ship either remains Theseus's or becomes something else entirely. Earth, philosophy has increasingly recognized that such binary oppositions are often false constraints. The ship exists in a state of identity continuity where it is both the same and different simultaneously. Quantum superposition applied to metaphysics, Kelvari observed, both eyes focused on Charlie now. Intriguing. More than that, Charlie continued, warming to the topic despite his need for emotional restraint. It suggests that identity itself is a relationship rather than a property. a connection between past and present states that can be measured along multiple dimensions simultaneously. The debate continued for nearly 3 hours, with each competitor building upon or challenging the other's frameworks. To Charlie's surprise, his human perspective, which embraced paradox rather than resolving it, gained traction within the Bo group. By the conclusion, even the Bantari had incorporated elements of relational identity theory into its final position. When the results were announced, Charlie's pod had been ranked second overall, with Charlie himself receiving high marks for novel integration of seemingly incompatible epistemological frameworks. As the competitors dispersed for the midday rest period, Zixal intercepted Charlie in the corridor. "Congratulations on your performance, human," the Councilor said, though his tentacles betrayed his continuing suspicion. "Your flexibility of thought is unexpected." "Thank you, Councilor," Charlie replied with a small bow, "though I'm simply presenting established Earth philosophy." "Are you?" Zixal's containment sphere drifted closer. "Our research suggests that Earth philosophers typically exhibit strong emotional attachment to their theoretical frameworks. You, however, displayed no such attachment, no defensiveness when challenged, no pride when your ideas were adopted." Charlie maintained his neutral expression with effort. "The tournament requires emotional discipline. I've trained accordingly." "Indeed." Zixal's voice modulator lowered to a near whisper. "But I wonder, human, what happens when that discipline finally breaks? Because it will break. It's merely a question of when." As Zixal floated away, Charlie felt the eye twitch returning. The Councilor wasn't wrong. Maintaining this level of control was becoming increasingly difficult. And tomorrow's event, the xenocultural immersion, would test that control in entirely new ways. He needed a moment of reprieve, a brief release from the constant vigilance. Checking that the corridor was empty, Charlie ducked into an alcove designed for private meditation. Once alone, he allowed his carefully maintained facade to slip just slightly. His shoulders sagged, and he pressed his palms against his eyes, taking several deep breaths. Temporary emotional decompression, Charlie spun around to find Kelveri standing at the entrance to the alcove, both eyes regarding him with unmistakable curiosity. "Just gathering my thoughts," he replied, quickly reassembling his neutral expression. "No need to perform for me, human," she said, stepping into the alcove. "The Sensorium Collective understands the necessity of emotional regulation cycles. Even our species requires periodic expression to prevent neural degradation." Charlie hesitated, then allowed his posture to relax slightly. "It's challenging to maintain tournament standards continuously." "I imagine so, particularly for a human." She tilted her head. "Though you've managed admirably thus far better than the Council anticipated. Is that why you've been watching me so closely? To see when I'll fail?" Kelveri's copper skin rippled in what might have been amusement. "I've been watching you because you're the most interesting variable in this tournament. Most competitors perform exactly as expected. Their strengths and weaknesses are known quantities. You, however, I'm unpredictable?" "Paradoxically, no. You've been remarkably predictable, consistently exceeding expectations while maintaining perfect emotional control. It's the sustainability of that performance that intrigues me." Charlie smiled faintly. "Wondering when the human will finally crack?" "Wondering why the human is trying so hard not to," she countered, her eyes rotating to focus on different aspects of his face simultaneously. "The effort you're expending suggests stakes beyond mere competition." For a moment, Charlie considered confiding in her. Something about Kelveri suggested she might be more understanding than most, but the risk was too great. His mission was too important. "I simply want to prove that humans belong in galactic society," he said instead. "That we're not the chaotic, emotional liabilities we're assumed to be." "A noble goal," Kelveri replied, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Though I wonder if you're proving the wrong point." "What do you mean?" "Perhaps what makes humans valuable isn't their ability to mimic other species' emotional restraint, but rather their unique perspective, one that embraces complexity and contradiction rather than eliminating it. She moved toward the exit. Something to consider before tomorrow's xenocultural immersion. After all, understanding other cultures is not the same as becoming them. As she left, Charlie leaned against the wall considering her words. The xenocultural immersion would require competitors to navigate the social customs, taboos, and expectations of various alien cultures, detecting and adapting to unspoken rules without explicit instruction. It was in many ways the ultimate test of a species' capacity for cultural integration, and for Charlie, it represented both his greatest opportunity and his most significant risk. Because while he had studied countless alien cultures, the real challenge tomorrow would be continuing to suppress his own. The xenocultural immersion chamber was a technological marvel, a vast adaptive environment capable of perfectly simulating the homeworlds, habitats, and cultural contexts of every competing species. As